Faithful women who remain devoted until the very end simply do not exist, with only the rarest of exceptions. Every man knows this. One man suffers from it, another accepts it, and a third tries his best to ignore it. I lived with my wife for nearly 40 years. We got married when I was 20 and she was 19. We went through all kinds of things, arguments, reconciliations, hardships, and joys. But I was always certain that in all those years we never once betrayed each other. Wherever fate may have thrown me, she was always beside me. We had 2 wonderful children, our son Paul and our daughter Kate. They are both grown now, with their own families and children. I was sure that in front of us lay a calm, peaceful old age, surrounded by beloved grandchildren. I am a physician. I served for 25 years in the United States Army, rising to the rank of colonel in the Army Medical Corps. I had been retired for 10 years, although retired is not entirely accurate, because to this day I still work at a private clinic. I rarely hold a scalpel anymore. Age has its own demands, but I still keep a practice as a therapist. My wife's name is Nancy. She also continues to work at an advertising agency. By education, she is a designer. We did not struggle financially. We simply kept working because we enjoyed it. During my years of service, I traveled to many places. I spent nearly a year in Africa, another time in Asia, and I worked in several combat zones where American troops were deployed. But truth be told, I hardly saw those countries. The work of a military physician is practically around the clock. And yet every time I returned home, I knew that a loving wife and children awaited me. At least, that was what I believed. Sadly, as I would discover, it was nothing more than wishful thinking. Despite her age, my wife managed to preserve her natural beauty. She always took care of herself, and her figure remained girlish, her face free of wrinkles. When we walked together, people often mistook her for my young mistress. The contrast was so sharp. A blonde woman still youthful, beside a gray-haired, mature man. She found the joke amusing. I admit it flattered me as well. But as it turned out, I was laughing in vain. It all happened one rainy November evening. Have you noticed that the events that change our lives for the worst so often occur on dark autumn nights, as if dying nature itself tries to drag us along with it? It was late fall. A cold wind drove drops of rain against the window, turning them into thin streams running down the glass. I sat at the kitchen table, going through papers in search of my medical record. On Monday, I was due for a checkup at the clinic, and I needed to find my immunization chart. Nancy was not home. She had gone into the city earlier to buy groceries and prepare Sunday dinner for us. As I sorted through old yellow documents, I suddenly stumbled upon something that shocked me. It was a page from Nancy's own medical file, dated to a period when I had been on a long overseas deployment, away from nearly a year. That was 4 years after our daughter's birth. The document described a pregnancy and premature birth. According to the records, Nancy had given birth to a 6-month premature child who lived only 3 days before dying. Then followed the medical analyses, her blood tests, the baby's blood group, and Rh factor. The child's blood type was group O negative. Nancy and I both have group A positive. It was medically impossible for the child to be mine, and besides, I was not even in the country at that time. It felt as if a heavy cabinet had crashed down upon me. My wife had been unfaithful. While I was far away, she had managed to become pregnant and nearly bore another man's child. Just half an hour earlier, I had believed I had a strong family, a loving wife, and a cloudless future. Now, before me lay only ruins. I sat staring at the page, unable to collect my scattered thoughts. Finally, I forced myself to put the papers back in place, hiding the discovery in my briefcase. The most important thing now was not to lose control. It was a documented fact. Nancy had betrayed me.
Honestly, I wanted to confront her immediately when she returned, but I decided first to understand everything completely. As for our children, that was clear enough. There was a 9-year gap between Paul and Kate, and both of them had the same blood type as me. Besides, their resemblance left no doubt that they were my children. But that realization did not bring me any relief. I could not comprehend why Nancy had done this to me. We had married for love. I had courted her for almost a year. For me, there were no other women. Although I was a reasonably attractive man and never lacked female attention, for me, there had always been only one woman, Nancy. Throughout our life together, I tried to surround her with care and affection. Sometimes I even thought that I had never really had another life before her. She was everything to me, and even more. My heart ached. I stepped onto the balcony to breathe fresh air. Looking down in the dim light of the street lamp, I saw a car pull up in front of our building. Nancy stepped out gracefully, and behind her appeared a man. He opened the back door and took out grocery bags. Nancy quickly kissed him on the cheek, grabbed the bags, and went inside. The man sat back in the driver's seat, and the car slowly drove away. Moments later, the front door opened, and I heard Nancy's voice. "John, are you home?" she called loudly. She explained casually that she had stopped by a friend's house to chat, that they had lingered there too long, and now she would prepare something quickly for dinner. She kissed me on the cheek, and I smelled the freshness of champagne on her breath. She wiped a trace of lipstick from my skin. "So, was it your friend who drove you home?" I asked, trying hard to keep my voice calm. Nancy looked at me with an unfamiliar expression. She hesitated, clearly unsure how to answer. "Do not make a scene, John. I took a taxi. Well, actually, an acquaintance gave me a ride," she added hurriedly. "Oh, I see. He must be a very close acquaintance, since you kissed him goodbye," I said, my heart pounding so hard I thought the neighbors might hear it. I stood, opened the cabinet, and took out a bottle of bourbon. Nancy watched me nervously. "How do you know that?" she asked. "I was on the balcony. I saw you with him," I replied, forcing myself to remain calm. "So, tell me, was that kiss the payment for the ride?" "John, what are you saying?" she whispered. I poured whiskey into a glass. "Sit down. I have a few questions for you." I pulled out a chair, then retrieved the fateful medical record from my briefcase. I placed it before her. "Explain this, Nancy." She turned a few pages, then suddenly recoiled as though burned. "Where did you get this? Did you read it?" "Yes." "Who were you pregnant by? What happened?" I asked, clutching the glass but unable to drink. She was silent for a while. Then, unexpectedly calm, she said, "This was bound to happen someday. Maybe it is even good that it has come out now." And then, in that same even tone, she told me everything. While I had been away on one of my long deployments, she met a young man 11 years her junior. She fell in love with him, hopelessly, uncontrollably. At first they met secretly, but then she sent the children to her mother and moved him into our apartment. They lived together as husband and wife. Their passion led to pregnancy. He even proposed to her. She, a married woman with 2 children. In her delirium, she even hoped I might not return at all, and that life would sort itself out. But things did not work out as she imagined. The child was born premature and died after 3 days. At this point, Nancy broke into tears. From her words, I understood that during that time, she had cared nothing for our children. After the baby's death, her relationship with the young man began to fade. Soon another woman appeared, and he left her in pursuit of new adventures. After some grieving, Nancy gathered the children and waited for me to return. When I came back, she greeted me as if nothing had happened, playing the role of a devoted wife for decades. I was stunned. For a while, I lost the ability to think or speak. I sat staring at the wall, my mind empty, until her next words shook me again. "Half a year earlier," she said, "that same lover had reappeared in our city. Their passion reignited, and she had been seeing him ever since. She admitted she still loved him and wanted to start a new life with him. After 40 years with me, after raising our children, she now wanted to cast it all aside and begin anew with the man she had secretly loved all along." As she spoke, she seemed like an executioner performing his duty, cold, detached, destroying me with each word.
I poured myself another glass of bourbon and drank it down in one gulp. It was a strange drink. It did not seem to have any effect on me. I picked up the bottle and looked at it in the light. The color seemed normal, light brown, exactly as good aged bourbon should look. I thought perhaps I just needed to pour more, or maybe not pour at all, but drink directly from the bottle. Have you ever noticed that a good bourbon bottle has a wide and convenient neck, almost like a decanter? Very comfortable, I'd tell you. A glass is practically unnecessary. Nancy was sitting across from me in silence. I even became concerned. Had she run out of words? Or maybe simply run out of fuel? She had been speaking so confidently, so smoothly. Smart woman. She had deceived me so skillfully for all those years. If I had not found that medical record, I probably would never have suspected anything. Truly remarkable, like a hereditary master of deception. And those words of hers, "That is how it happens. It just happens." Of course, that is what she said, as if betrayal were some ordinary occurrence. I stood up, pushed the stool aside with my foot, and without saying a word, I went into the bedroom. I dressed quickly, threw a few things into a bag, and again, without speaking, walked to the door. "John?" Her half-question hung in the air. "Are you not going to say anything at all?" I looked at her. Her figure was outlined in the dark doorway of the kitchen. Will she start crying now, or is it just my imagination? Poor girl, she is so nervous. I shrugged my shoulders, opened the door, and walked out, trying not to bump the door frame with the horn she had given me. Outside, autumn was waiting for me. I drew the damp air deeply into my lungs, slung the bag over my shoulder, and slowly walked along the sidewalk covered with yellow leaves. I suddenly felt the strong craving for a cigarette. I even patted my pockets just in case. Of course, I found nothing. I had quit 20 years ago on Nancy's insistence. She had been very worried about my health and longevity. It was already late. The city seemed to be dozing in an anxious sleep. Most windows were dark, only streetlights dripping dim light onto nearly deserted streets. My cell phone beeped. Nancy again, worried about her husband. I pressed decline and switched off the phone. Suddenly, a crushing sadness fell on me. I bit the collar of my coat between my teeth to hold back the cry of despair. Only now did the full realization of what had happened hit me. I even shook my head as though trying to drive away the tormenting thoughts. What should I do? Where should I go? The easiest thing would be to slam the door and walk away with my head held high. But where to go? To my children? They already had plenty of problems of their own. To a mistress? I never had one. Probably a mistake. Only to work, maybe. I could say I was on call, spend the night at the clinic, and tomorrow make a final decision. I walked slowly past the black silhouettes of houses, trying not to slip on the wet, fallen leaves. "Hey, buddy, got a cigarette?" I turned my head and fell into darkness.
A sharp, bright light burst into my eyes, like a SWAT team storming a hideout. "Well, finally," said a male voice close by. With great effort, I turned my head. "Welcome back, John." My chief was looking at me with undisguised joy. Words came to me with difficulty. "You are in our clinic. Last night you were brought into the emergency hospital with a traumatic brain injury. You had your documents with you and they called us. We brought you here immediately and operated right away. The operation was successful. You are alive and with us again. We already informed your children and your wife. Your son is on his way. The detective promised to stop by after lunch. As for your wife, I do not have a wife," I whispered. The recent events again made my heart clench. No, I have no wife anymore. The door to the ward creaked. "Dad, hi. How are you feeling?" My son Paul kissed me on the cheek. "You really made us nervous. Here, I brought you fruit and juice. Nothing else is allowed yet." He carefully adjusted the blanket on my bed. "Mom could not come. She had urgent matters. Do not worry." "No need for her to come," I said quietly. Paul looked at me with understanding. He already knew about the break between me and Nancy. Interesting. What had she told him? And what do ex-wives usually say in such cases? He did not love me enough, did not cherish me, killed the woman inside me. All right, enough self-pity. As the old saying goes, the past does not count. 2 weeks later, I was discharged. Nancy came twice to visit, but I refused to see her. The past did not count. At first, I rented a small apartment not far from the clinic where I worked and began to get used to single life. The separation from my wife had a dual effect on me. On one side, of course, there was the pain of betrayal. But on the other side, there were some new and unclear perspectives. One thing I knew with certainty: there would be no new relationships with women. The vaccination against them had been too strong. Later came the divorce, and I was left not only without a wife, but without my home. The children kept a neutral position, but it was obvious that they leaned more toward their mother. I buried myself in work. I even returned to performing surgeries again. In work, I tried to drown out the pain, and I succeeded. I did not start drinking, as sometimes happens with abandoned husbands.
About 2 months later, I received a call from an old friend. "John, do you remember that several years ago I borrowed a large sum from you?" he began. Of course I remembered. 3 years earlier, Steve had borrowed a substantial amount of money from me. At that time, he had serious problems with his business, and he had no one else to turn to. I had just sold my mother's apartment back then, so I had the money. When I lent it to him, I did not set any deadline for repayment. I understood that he could not return it right away. My father used to say, "When you lend money to a friend, imagine that you are giving it to him as a gift. If you value this person, never remind him about the debt. If he is able, he will repay it himself when the time comes." So I never pressed Steve about the money. He had managed to stabilize his business, but the debt remained. "Thank you for helping me then," he continued. "Now I am doing well, more than well, in fact. I invested your money into the business, and today it brings very good dividends." He handed me a bank card. "This is my debt with interest. The amount is 5 times larger than what you lent me back then." This came at exactly the right moment. With that money, I bought myself a small house not far from the city and a car. I did not have time to take care of the household myself, so I hired a helper. She was nearly 15 years younger than me, a fairly young woman, already divorced. Her name was Natalie. She had been married for almost 20 years, but she and her husband had never had children because of her infertility.
Eventually, her husband left her and went to another woman. That is what the neighbor told me. Natalie herself did not like to talk about it. I had no particular plans concerning her. To me, she was simply a helper with the house. About half a year passed. One day I was chopping firewood and suddenly felt very ill. A terrible headache came on, and I lost consciousness. When I woke up, I was in the hospital. Sitting beside my bed was Natalie. She had been the one to call the ambulance. When the doctors arrived, she was holding my head in her lap. I recovered, although head injuries never go away easily. But after that incident, I began to look at Natalie with new eyes. Only then did I notice what a beautiful woman she was. Almost without noticing, our relationship moved into intimacy. And then one day, I proposed to her. That fall, we got married. I knew there could be no children between us, therefore I felt completely free in my love for her, without restraint. But about 3 months after our wedding, Natalie began to feel unwell, nausea, headaches. I immediately took her to the clinic where I worked. What a shock it was when it turned out that she was pregnant, already nearly 2 months along. I remember Natalie's words exactly. "No matter what you say, I am keeping this child." I embraced her tightly and kissed her eyes. In that moment, I understood one truth. When fate closes a door, it immediately opens another. Life was settling down again. And then, one day, just before Christmas, I received a phone call. It was Nancy. "We need to meet," she said in a pleading, almost pitiful voice. "I reserved a table at a restaurant. Please, come at 7 o'clock in the evening. I am begging you." Nancy was sitting across from me at the table, her whole appearance expressing humility and remorse. "John, forgive me. There has not been a single day that I have not thought about you," she began, her eyes filled with tears. "I made a terrible mistake. I betrayed you, our family, our children." She went on talking, while I silently looked at the woman I had once loved madly, the woman for whom I would have given my life without hesitation, the woman who had betrayed me twice, coldly and cynically, the woman who had lied to me for nearly 20 years, the woman who had erased me from her life and gone to another man. And now she sat before me, suddenly awakened, trying to come back. Nancy repeated again and again that the time without me had made her realize how much she truly loved me, that now she understood I had been the only real man in her life. For some reason, she reminded me of a siren from Greek mythology. Her words wrapped around me, lulled me, filling my mind with fantasies that I alone possessed her heart. "Forgive me, forgive me." She repeated this word like a spell. And I looked at her mouth, painted with bright lipstick, the mouth that was now flattering me with sweet words, and I imagined how she had kissed and caressed her lover with those same lips. Did she really believe that I would accept her explanations? That she had been confused, did not know what she wanted? That this woman who had cheated on me, borne a child from another man, abandoned me, spent her free time in someone else's arms, and never remembered me, had all the time actually loved only me? No. She had once found justifications for her meanness, and without hesitation she left me. She had received her fill of passion with her lover, many times in his bed. She had coldly planned the moment when she would deliver the final blow to me, and now she was here to offer me the only thing she still had, but already used, already spoiled. She had finally realized that she had been needed only for amusement and only as long as she had money. She had realized that with him she had no future, that there was no one now to provide for her, and so she crawled back to me, hoping to restore what had been lost. My God, did she really think I was so stupid, ready to believe all her lies? I listened silently to her long monologue of repentance. I had nothing to say. I did not take pleasure in her humiliation. I did not gloat. Somewhere on a human level, I even pitied her. After all, 40 years together. But our meeting had to end. At that very moment, my phone rang. It was Natalie, asking where she should pick me up. I gave her the address and began to say goodbye. "Is that your woman?" Nancy asked quietly, her eyes full of tears. "Yes," I answered. "And how long have you been together?" "For almost a year and a half." "That is how it happens," I said, standing up. "Goodbye, Nancy. Try to be happy." When I walked out of the restaurant, I turned around. Nancy was standing behind the brightly decorated holiday window, her hands pressed to her chest, watching me. People bustled around me, hurrying about. Life was going on. Across the street, a bright neon sign flashed insistently, "Drink Coca-Cola and feel the joy." Lies. I knew better. I got into the car and turned the key. The engine purred evenly and calmly. I turned on the left blinker and in a few seconds merged into the flow of cars, all of them rushing somewhere in the endless stream of life.